Maija, we will start with Maija Laurila. You're head of unit company law at the European Commission's Directorate General for Justice and Consumer. In addition to European company law, this unit deals with corporate governance, law and policy in general, and also corporate governance in financial institutions. So you are well placed to comment. Well, I know that the Commission can only comment, that you can only say what you can say, if I may say so. Not even? So please give us your first take on these proposals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you indeed for inviting me, and thank you, Beate, for the great presentation. I had some preview already in earlier conferences of this, and it all still makes sense. So it's it's a pleasure to listen to that. So the Commission, of course, you've understood that has been thinking about or giving attention to these matters for a while now, because the Horizon 2020 funding, that was almost ahead of the curve, because that was really in time now for further reflections. It gives the results now, which is very good, because now this topic is so much on the front page. So what has happened in addition to that was that in 2018, the Commission, the former Commission, then put in the Sustainable Finance Action Plan some language about the possible role of corporate governance. So it was noted that already there is this risk of for the finance of companies and for the funding for the sustainability transition. And for the planet, it was already remarked there. So then we got this mandate to carry out some further analytical and consultative work, so some studies that were then mentioned in that plan and that are underway now. So I can say just briefly about that later if there is time. So what our moderator says, I can only say what I can say. Yes, I can say that whatever the Commission would be using the results of the SMART project for, it would be part of a bigger bag of evidence. So we would still have to do a proper impact assessment for anything that we would actually want to put as a reform proposal if that happens. So we are now still at this analytical and consultative stage. But you have seen, in addition to the quotes that were taken from the European Green Deal on the slides earlier today, that there is also a sentence about the need to embed sustainably into the corporate governance because too many companies focus on, or many companies focus on short-term financial performance compared to their long-term development and sustainability aspects. So there is that clear recognition of the attention needed for these topics. And also the Commission's work program for this year mentions this issue. So what does the SMART project really give us now, and what questions would arise from my perspective? Beate said it, that her project or the findings of the team, they really established the problem of short-term financial value maximization and demonstrate that it doesn't come from the law, European law, national law, but it is a strongly embedded social norm. So if somebody now tells us that it's the law, we know that we have this evidence that it's not the law. This, of course, doesn't mean that the law shouldn't be touched now. So I want to be clear also about that. And indeed, my team's focus is company law, and that's also where the SMART project now has proposed specific possible inputs. What we see now on Beate's slides and otherwise is that the purpose of the company is in spotlight. And the project findings focus also on the boundaries of profit-making, sustainable value within the planetary boundaries, balancing stakeholder interest. So one of my questions is, has the SMART project sufficiently recognized the profit-making need when it argues that there is a need to balance stakeholder interests? I think I would pick up also from what the Norwegian business representative just said about people, profit, planet. So the 3 Ps that business organizations now say, and I think it's also when we think about the European business competitiveness angle that has been high on the agenda for many years and has to be, because if there is no business, then also that's not the way we want this to go. So it's just a question. Maybe you will be able to respond to that in a very, very helpful way. So that was the one remark. And then also my colleagues who are working on this more sort of at technical level, they also remarked that the concept of purpose of the company, the purpose of the company is often associated with what the company actually does. What is this business about? So there is some confusion perhaps of the language that is used now, so that we would have to be also clear about if we want to use that concept as such. So I wouldn't, of course, comment on any of the drafting, but what I would say is that, well, it's still to be decided if there will be legal or legislative proposal or not, but what is very often also in the UNGP, so the United Nations Guiding Principles, and in other work, it's this concept of smart mix. Now it echoes very nicely because the project here is smart, but the smart mix is about assessing all the available tools, soft law and hard law, non-legislative and legislative, legal provisions and guidelines or guidance. So that is often what would come at the European level if we start a real initiative. And anyway, the impact assessment, as if you have looked at the usual EU impact assessment, so they would always go from no action to more and more sort of intervening types of possible actions. So we would also assess the softer than legislative options. And then maybe I should also say that if we do act under the company law legal basis, that only allows a directive and not a regulation. So they also bear in mind that since there is a lot of national company law already and other national law that actually acts in parallel to the company law, so we would also have to remember that not too many details probably would be in the company law itself. Oh, okay. I'm saying that I'm short of time, so then I will have to wrap up.
Please take your time. You like to hear the Commission disclosing?
Okay.
Take your time.
So yes, because I would have actually a couple of questions for the research team, but maybe I can ask my questions later. So what I will use my last minute for is that I would say the balancing of shareholder interest or stakeholder interests seems well argued here now. But I've also heard in other events that there is the question of who really should do the balancing. Is it actually the legislator or the board of the business itself? So that's one of the questions that we would, of course, look into. But good arguments have been made in the SMART project. I recognize that. And then the importance of targets that actually comes from the SMART project, I think that's also very nicely highlighted. The enforcement questions certainly not straightforward, so I think we'll spend quite some time on that. And then there is also in the proposal something about EU corporate governance code, so that's not something that has been discussed much lately elsewhere, I must admit. So yeah, there was already reference to some member states having activities, so that is of course something that we would also have to take into account seriously in our work. And that whatever we would propose, we would have to take into account all the other parallel developments that are there, especially in the areas that also SMART project highlights, like the non-financial reporting review, so how the two initiatives would then work together if there is separate initiatives launched. And reporting is crucial. But reporting as such has not, in our findings, been enough. So that's where we also, with the SMART project findings, that it seems that something more would be helpful. I'll finish here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Olivier. You will answer to this question. Thank you very much. We will come back to you. There are things you haven't disclosed yet, so I'd like to hear more from you. Michel De Fabiani, you're chair of the policy committee at ECODA. ECODA is the umbrella organization representing, through the national associations, the directors sitting on the board of companies of all sizes and sectors in Europe. I knew you because you are ex-BP president, former BP. Former BP president in Brussels. So is it to the board or to the legislation to enforce this kind of recommendations?